All right, ready to dive deep into market segmentation. You know how companies figure out exactly who to talk to so they can tailor their products and messages? It's fascinating stuff. You sent over pages 266 to 388 from a business textbook chapter. It's called Identifying Market Segments and Targets. And let me tell you, it's packed with juicy insights. I've got a marketing whiz here to help us unpack it all.
I'm excited to dive in.
Okay, so first things first, can you give us like a quick and dirty definition of market segmentation?
Sure. So imagine you're throwing a party and you're trying to appeal to absolutely everyone.
Ooh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right. You'd probably end up with a chaotic mess that pleases no one. Market segmentation is realizing that not everyone wants the same thing. It's about dividing the market into smaller, more defined groups of people. People who share similar needs, desires, and buying habits.
So basically, companies are figuring out who their tribe is, right?
It-
The people who are going to be most receptive to their message.
Exactly. It's about efficiency and effectiveness. Companies can focus their energy on the groups they can serve best.
I like that, finding your tribe. Now, the textbook talks about two main ways companies segment consumer markets, descriptive characteristics, and also behavioral considerations. Can you break those down for us?
Yeah, definitely. So, descriptive characteristics, those are things you can actually observe about people, like where they live, their geography,
Right.
their
Right.
age, gender, income, that's demographics.
Got it.
And then even their lifestyle values and personality traits, and that's psychographics.
Wait, hold on. You can segment people based on their personalities. How does that work?
Oh, it gets really interesting. So, have you ever heard of this system called Prism?
Prism?
Yeah, it's run by Nielsen Claritas. They've categorized U.S. neighborhoods into, get this, 66 distinct lifestyle segments.
66. Wow.
Each one has a catchy name too, like a bohemian mix or country squires.
Bohemian mix. I love that.
It's kind of like a marketing personality quiz for entire zip codes.
Okay, so let me get this straight. If I know someone lives in a bohemian mixed neighborhood, I can already start making assumptions about their preferences. That's a little scary.
You can, and it often works. You might guess they prefer unique artisanal products. Maybe they're eco-conscious, they spend their weekends at farmers markets, probably not watching much cable TV. Parisium takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. It's pretty powerful stuff.
I'm intrigued. Okay, so we've got the personality piece. What about behavioral considerations? How do companies segment based on how people actually act?
So that delves into how consumers respond to products and marketing efforts. Do they prioritize convenience over price? Are they super brand loyal? Do they only buy things on sale? It's about understanding the why behind their purchasing decisions.
So it's not just about who they are on paper, it's about what motivates them as consumers.
Exactly. So for example, let's say you're a company selling high-end, like organic dog food. You're not going to target your marketing toward folks who just want the cheapest option. You're going to look for pet parents who are willing to spend more on their furry friends' health and well-being.
Right. You're targeting people who are already predisposed to value what you're offering.
Precisely. And by understanding who your customer is and how they behave, you start to see these patterns emerge. And that's where the magic of market segmentation really happens. You can create marketing campaigns that speak directly to their needs and desires.
This is making me see those targeted ads I get online in a whole new light. Okay, so let's get into some specific examples of how companies use this stuff. The textbook mentions geographic segmentation, and I have to say, this hyperlocal marketing trend is blowing my mind. Like, companies are getting so specific these days, targeting not just cities, but even individual neighborhoods.
It's true. It's all about getting the right message to the right people at the right time. And with all the data available today, companies can get, incredibly precise.
Yeah, it's almost a little creepy how targeted it can get.
I know, right? But think about it. If you know most of your customers live within, say, a 5-mile radius of your store, why wouldn't you focus your marketing efforts in that specific area?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer for brick-and-mortar businesses.
hmm
But what about companies that mostly operate online? How does geography factor into their segmentation strategy?
Even online businesses can leverage geographic data. I mean, if you're selling ski gear online, you wouldn't want to be targeting people who live in Florida, would you?
Probably not the ideal customer base for that.
Right. By understanding where your ideal customers are, even if they're buying online, you can make your ad campaigns so much more effective.
Gotcha. So we've covered geography. Let's move on to demographics. The textbook talks about age, life stage, gender, income, and generation as key variables. Seems like marketers have been using these forever, right?
They have, but the way they're used is definitely evolving. It's not as simple as just lumping everyone into a single category anymore.
So it's not just about checking boxes. It's about understanding the nuances within those categories.
Exactly. Like, take life stage, for example. It's not just about how old you are, it's about what's happening in your life at a particular moment.
Right.
Getting married, having a baby, buying a house, sending your kids to college, retiring, all of these big life events create different needs and desires.
It's true. And companies are definitely keyed into that. The textbook mentions the wedding industry as a perfect example. Newly engaged couples are bombarded with marketing messages because companies know they're about to shell out a ton of cash on everything, from the venue to the dress to the photographer.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just weddings. Think about the baby industry. Companies target expecting parents with literally everything they could possibly need for their little one. They understand that new parents are a prime target market, and they tailor their messaging accordingly.
It's like they're anticipating your every need before you even know you have it.
Right. And it's not just about targeting people at those specific moments, it's also about recognizing that the whole idea of family is changing.
How so?
Well, we're seeing more single-person households, blended families, same-sex couples. The traditional nuclear family isn't the only game in town anymore.
That's a really good point, and I bet smart companies are recognizing that and adapting their messaging to reflect that.
Oh, they are. They're becoming much more inclusive in their marketing and acknowledging the diversity of modern families.
Love that. Okay, so we've got age and life stage. What about gender? It seems like a lot of marketing is still pretty gendered, like pink toys for girls and blue toys for boys. Is that starting to change at all?
It is. You're right that there are still tons of products marketed specifically to men or women, but there's definitely a growing trend toward what they call gender-neutral marketing.
So are companies realizing that not everyone fits neatly into those traditional gender boxes?
That's exactly it. They're realizing that gender stereotypes can be limiting and that people, don't want to be put in a box.
Totally. So instead of assuming that all women want to buy makeup and all men want to buy power tools, they're starting to appeal to individuals based on their actual interests and needs, regardless of their gender.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that people are complex and their buying decisions are influenced by a whole bunch of factors, not just their gender.
I'm totally on board with that. Okay, let's talk income. That seems like a pretty straightforward way to segment the market, right?
Yep.
People who earn more money can afford to buy more expensive things. But the textbook mentions it's not always that simple.
You're right. Income isn't always a perfect predictor of buying behavior. Sometimes people with lower incomes are willing to splurge on certain things that are really important to them.
Yeah, like that classic example of blue-collar workers being among the first to buy color TVs back in the day.
Exactly. They were willing to invest in a product that brought them joy, even if it meant cutting back in other areas.
It's about priorities. Okay, so income segmentation might be more nuanced than it appears at first glance.
Right. And there's this fascinating thing happening in the market they call the hourglass shape, with the middle class shrinking and more people shifting towards either the high end or the low end.
So more consumers are either looking for luxury goods or hunting for bargains.
Yeah, exactly. Companies that are stuck in the middle are having a harder time. They need to either move upscale or offer a really strong value proposition to stay competitive.
So it's about finding your niche in the hourglass, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about generational marketing. The textbook mentions millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and the silent generation as these key cohorts. Do you think those generational labels really hold up?
They can be a useful starting point, but it's super important to remember that generalizations about entire generations can be misleading. Like, not all millennials are obsessed with avocado toast, and not all baby boomers are afraid of technology.
Right, each generation is diverse.
Exactly. You have to go deeper than just a label to understand what motivates people.
So it's not about stereotyping. It's about using those labels as a jumping off point to really understand individuals within each generation.
Right. And it's so important to avoid stereotypes. Like Gen X, for example, they often get portrayed as cynical and disengaged, but they're actually a really influential generation with a lot of buying power.
They kind of get overlooked sometimes, don't they?
They do, but they were the ones who grew up with the internet, and they're super savvy consumers who value authenticity and transparency.
Don't underestimate Gen X. What about baby boomers? They're the ones with all the money, right?
They do control a huge chunk of the nation's wealth, But marketers, especially those chasing after younger demographics, often overlook them.
It seems like a missed opportunity if you ask me. They have all the money.
It is. Baby boomers are active, they're engaged, and they have lots of disposable income. They're also living longer and healthier lives than previous generations. So, they're a valuable market for all sorts of products and services.
It's like the textbook says, don't ignore the boomers. I'm seeing a theme here. It's all about understanding your target market and tailoring your message to resonate with their unique needs and desires, no matter what generation they belong to.
That's the heart of it. That's what market segmentation is all about.
This is so insightful. We've covered a lot of ground already, from geography and demographics to even generational marketing. But before we wrap up this part, there's one more aspect I want to touch on: multicultural marketing. The U.S. is becoming more and more diverse, and the textbook highlights Hispanic Americans as a key segment. Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. So Hispanic Americans are a huge part of the U.S. population and have enormous buying power. It's important to remember that they're a diverse group with a rich cultural heritage.
Right, they're not a monolith.
Exactly. So it's important to avoid making generalizations.
Absolutely. So for marketers who are trying to reach this segment, what are some of the key insights they should keep in mind?
Well, Hispanic Americans often place a high value on family, relationships, and community. They tend to be brand loyal and responsive to marketing messages that feel culturally relevant and authentic.
So it's about understanding their values and speaking to them in a way that feels genuine and respectful of their culture.
Exactly. And again, it's about recognizing the diversity within the community. There are many different nationalities and cultures represented, so it's really important to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, you can't just translate your English as into Spanish and call it a day.
Exactly. It takes a lot more nuance and cultural understanding than that.
I'm getting the sense that the days of mass marketing are pretty much over.
I think they are. In today's world, with all these different media channels, it's all about niche marketing and micro-targeting. It's about finding those specific tribes, as you said, and speaking directly to them.
Love that. Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground, but there's still so much more to explore. So let's take a break and come back to uncover more about market segmentation in part 2.
All right, so ready to dig into behavioral segmentation?
Yeah, let's do it. Remind me, though, why is understanding consumer behavior so crucial for companies?
Well, like they say, actions speak louder than words, right? People might say they want one thing, but then their actual buying habits tell a completely different story. Behavioral segmentation helps companies go beyond just what people say and figure out what actually drives those purchasing decisions.
So it's about looking at what people do, not just what they say.
Exactly. Can you give me like a real-world example of how this works?
Okay, how about loyalty programs?
Perfect example. Companies use these programs to reward their repeat customers, but they're also gathering a ton of valuable data about buying patterns. They track what people are buying, how often they're buying it, how much they're spending, and all that data allows them to identify those like super valuable customers.
The ones who are really engaged with the brand.
Yep. So instead of treating every customer exactly the same, they can focus on nurturing those relationships that are most likely to pay off over time.
I get it. Recognize that not all customers are created equal, and focus on the ones who are most valuable.
That's the idea. Okay, so the textbook mentions this thing called the marketing funnel. Can you explain what that is, and why is it relevant to behavioral segmentation?
Okay, so the marketing funnel, it's basically like a visual representation of the customer journey. From that first moment when someone becomes aware of a product or brand, all the way to the point where they become a loyal customer. It's like a roadmap that helps marketers understand how people are moving through that decision-making process.
Right. So you can think of it like at the top of the funnel, you have this wide audience, people who might be vaguely aware of your product. And then as you go down the funnel, that group gets smaller and smaller. You're reading out the people who aren't interested.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, that's where you've got those precious, loyal customers.
I like that visual, narrowing down the funnel until you get to those core customers.
Exactly. And behavioral segmentation can be applied at every stage of the funnel.
How so?
Okay, so let's say at the top of the funnel, you might target people who are browsing online for products like yours. But then as they move down the funnel, maybe they've visited your website or added items to their cart, your messaging can get more and more targeted. Like you might focus on specific benefits of your product or maybe offer them a little incentive to, actually complete the purchase.
So it's about like guiding people through that funnel step by step and getting them closer to that point where they actually convert into a customer.
Yes. And it's not just about getting them to buy once, it's about building those long-lasting relationships that lead to repeat business. That's where the real value is.
Makes sense. One thing I found super interesting in the textbook was how it talked about all those different roles people play in buying decisions.
Yeah,
It's not always just one person calling the shots.
so got it. Think about a family deciding on where to go for vacation. The kids might be the ones who initiate the conversation, suggesting Disneyland or, I don't know, a tropical island. Then the parents would act as influencers, researching the options, maybe reading reviews online. And then ultimately, one parent might end up being the decider, making that final call based on the budget or logistics. And then, of course, the whole family are the ones actually experiencing the vacation.
Right. So even in these decisions that seem pretty simple, there's often a whole bunch of people involved and playing different roles.
Totally. And it gets even more complex when you're talking about like bigger purchases, like a car or a house.
And for marketers, it's important to understand all those dynamics.
Absolutely. It's super valuable. Let's say you're selling toys. You might target your advertising to kids, knowing they're the ones who will bug their parents to buy the toy.
Oh, yeah, the pester power.
But at the same time, you also have to appeal to the parents because they're the ones with the credit card.
So you've got to craft messages that resonate with everyone who is involved in making that decision.
Exactly. It's all about understanding, the psychology of buying behavior.
Okay, so up until now, we've been mainly talking about, consumer markets. The textbook also mentions that businesses can be segmented too.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the same principles we've talked about also apply when companies are selling to other businesses. They look at things like demographics, stuff like the industry, the size of the company, location, but they also dig into those behavioral factors like purchasing patterns, budget cycles, even the decision-making style of the company they're trying to sell to.
So just like with individual consumers, you're looking for those patterns and insights that can help you target the right businesses with the right message.
Precisely.
Can you maybe give me an example of like how a company might segment the business market?
Sure. Let's say you're a software company that's selling a customer relationship management system, a CRM. You might segment the market based on company size. So smaller businesses might just need a simple CRM system, something that's affordable. But then larger companies, they might need a much more like robust, customizable solution. And then you might also target your marketing towards specific industries that are known to rely heavily on CRM systems, like sales and marketing, for example.
So you're identifying the businesses that are most likely to benefit from your product and then tailoring your sales pitch accordingly.
Exactly. It's about understanding the specific needs of your target market and positioning your product as the solution to their problems.
Now, this has been super helpful, but I have a question. After a company has gone through the trouble of identifying all these potential segments, how do they actually choose which ones to focus on? It can't be all of them, right?
Oh, that's a really great question. And that's where the strategy really comes in. Not all segments are created equal. Companies have to evaluate each one and figure out which are going to be the most profitable, in the long run.
So what are some of the factors that they consider? What are the key things they're looking for?
Well, first and foremost, they're going to look at the size of the segment. Is it big enough to justify the investment? And are there enough potential customers there? And then they look at the growth potential. Is that segment growing or is it shrinking?
So you want a segment that's big enough to matter and ideally one that's getting bigger, not smaller.
Right. And then they also have to think about what they call segment structural attractiveness.
Okay, structural attractiveness. What exactly does that mean?
It's about looking at the competitive landscape. So how many other competitors are already fighting for that same segment? Are there any potential substitutes for your product out there? What's the bargaining power of the buyers and the suppliers? You ideally want to find a segment where you have a chance to, stand out and really gain a competitive advantage.
So you don't want to be in this super crowded space where it's a fight to the death for every customer.
Right.
You want to find that sweet spot where there's enough demand, but not too much competition.
Right. You want to find a segment where you can establish yourself and build those long-lasting relationships with customers.
It sounds kind of like a game of chess, You have to be thinking a few moves ahead and anticipating how your competitors are going to act.
It is. But remember, it's not just about, outsmarting your competitors. It's also about making sure that the target market you're going after aligns with your own company's objectives and resources.
Right, you might find this amazing segment that looks perfect on paper, but if it doesn't fit with what your company is good at or what your long-term goals are, it's not going to work out.
Exactly. Focus your energy where it's going to make the biggest impact.
Okay, that makes total sense. So we've talked about how companies choose their target markets. Now let's dive into how they actually approach those markets. The textbook outlines these 4 levels of market segmentation: mass marketing, segment marketing, niche marketing, and micro marketing. Can you break those down for me?
Absolutely. So let's start with the most traditional approach, mass marketing. That's where you're trying to appeal to the broadest possible audience with one message.
So like Coca-Cola's Share a Coke campaign. They were trying to connect with everybody, no matter who they were or where they lived.
Perfect example. Mass marketing can work really well for those products that have universal appeal, but it's definitely becoming less and less common.
Why is that?
Well, people are just bombarded with messages these days from all directions. It's really hard to break through that noise with a one-size-fits-all approach.
So what's the alternative? What are companies doing instead?
Well, what's becoming more popular is segment marketing. That's where you're dividing the market into distinct groups and you're tailoring your message to each group's specific needs and wants.
So you're not trying to appeal to everyone. You're zeroing in on those segments that are most likely to be interested in what you're offering.
Exactly. And within segment marketing, there are a couple of approaches. There's what we call differentiated marketing, and then there's concentrated marketing.
Okay, tell me more about those.
Sure. So differentiated marketing, that's about creating different products and marketing campaigns for each segment you're targeting. Think of a car company that offers a whole range of vehicles to appeal to different types of people. They might have a sporty coupe for young professionals, an SUV for families, a fuel-efficient hybrid for, the eco-conscious driver.
So they're trying to appeal to like a broader range of customers by offering something for everyone.
Precisely. Now, concentrated marketing is a bit different. That's where you're really focusing on a single segment and you're becoming a leader in that niche. So you might have a company that just specializes in organic baby food. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're targeting those parents who are specifically looking for those healthy, natural products for their kids.
So it's about knowing exactly who you are as a company, knowing who you serve, and doing it really well.
Exactly. And then we have niche marketing, which is kind of similar to concentrated marketing, but it gets even more specific. You're targeting this very, very specific subset of the market that has unique needs.
So you're talking about a company that sells, I don't know, custom-made shoes for people with wide feet.
Perfect example. They're not trying to compete with the big shoe brands. They're focusing on a niche that's often underserved by the mainstream market.
It's about finding those underserved customers and becoming their go-to solution.
Exactly. And this is where the long tail concept comes in.
The long tail. What's that?
It's basically this idea that there's money to be made by catering to those smaller niche markets, even if they don't represent a huge percentage of the overall population.
So it's not just about those mass market hits anymore. It's about finding those passionate individuals who are looking for something specific.
Exactly. And the internet has made it way easier to reach those niche audiences. You can use targeted advertising, you can connect with people in online communities, no matter how obscure their interests might be.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've covered mass marketing, segment marketing, niche marketing. Now, what about this micro marketing thing? That sounds even more targeted.
So micro-marketing, that's where you're getting down to the individual customer level. It's the most personalized level of segmentation.
It's like those Amazon recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
Customers who bought this also bought. It feels like they know me better than I know myself sometimes.
That's no, right? That's a great example of micro-marketing in action. And this is where data and technology really become powerful tools. Companies are using these sophisticated algorithms to track our online behavior, our purchases, even what we're doing on social media. And it's all to create these hyper-personalized marketing experiences.
It's kind of amazing, but also a little creepy.
It's both, for sure, but it's definitely effective.
I have to admit, it is kind of cool to get those personalized recommendations that are like spot on.
Right, and this technology is only going to get more sophisticated as we go forward.
So buckle up, I guess. Okay, this is all making so much sense. We've talked about those different levels of market segmentation, but now I'm wondering, how do companies actually position themselves within those segments? The textbook mentions this idea of brand positioning as a key concept. What does that mean?
So brand positioning, that's all about creating a unique space for yourself in the market, It's what makes you stand out from the competition. It's about answering that question, why should someone choose your brand over all the other options out there?
Like the textbook talked about DirecTV and how they've positioned themselves as that premium alternative to cable. They're all about sports, HD channels, the best viewing experience, and they're definitely not afraid to charge a premium for it.
That's a great example. And they've been really good at communicating that value proposition to the right people, the folks who are willing to pay a little bit more for a better experience.
So I'm curious, how do companies actually go about defining their value proposition? What makes it compelling to customers? The textbook talked about this customer-focused value proposition.
Yeah, so it's about explaining clearly why your target customer should buy your product. What problem are you solving for them? What unique benefits are you offering that they can't get anywhere else? The textbook has some good examples. Like Hertz, they focus on being that, hassle-free car rental experience. And then Volvo's all about safety and reliability. And Domino's, well, they're all about delivering hot, fresh pizza fast.
It's about figuring out what really resonates with your audience and then emphasizing that in everything you do.
Exactly. You're making a promise to the customer, and you have to deliver on that promise consistently.
Okay. This is all starting to click for me. But one thing that I keep thinking about is that, companies don't operate in a vacuum, right? They have to be aware of what their competition is doing.
Oh, that's crucial. It's not enough to just identify your target market and come up with this brilliant value proposition. You have to understand where you fit in the overall competitive landscape.
The textbook talks about these different competitive strategies for market leaders, challengers, followers, and then I think nichers. Can you give me like a rundown of what those are?
Sure. So market leaders, they're like the top dogs. They have the biggest market share, the most resources. They're the ones that everyone else is trying to catch up to.
So we're talking about the Coca-Colas, the McDonald's, the Nikes of the world, those iconic brands that everyone knows.
Yep, exactly. They're the ones setting the standard. And then you've got the market challengers. Those are the companies that are trying to, take down the leader.
Trying to shake things up.
Right. They're often more aggressive and innovative, always coming up with new ways to disrupt things and steal some market share.
So you're thinking Pepsi constantly trying to chip away at Coke's dominance.
Yeah.
Or Samsung challenging Apple's position in the smartphone market.
Exactly. They're the ones that keep the leaders on their toes. And then we've got the market followers.
Okay, what are they all about?
Followers, they're kind of content to, be in second place. They're not really trying to knock the leader off their throne, but they still want to get their piece of the pie.
So are they kind of like imitating what the leaders are doing, maybe offering a similar product at a lower price or something?
That's often their strategy. Think about like store brand products that are similar to the big name brands but are cheaper.
Okay, so they're providing a good value alternative for people who are price conscious but still want a decent product.
Right. And then lastly, we've got the nichers.
What makes them different?
Nichers, they're like the specialists. They focus on serving a very specific part of the market, people with unique needs or interests. They're not trying to be all things to all people. They're happy dominating their little corner of the market.
So like a company that makes organic, gluten-free, vegan dog treats.
Exactly. They might not be appealing to every dog owner, but they're going to be a huge hit with those people who are specifically looking for those kinds of products.
And they can probably charge a premium because they're the experts in that niche.
That's the idea.
Okay, I love how the textbook breaks all this down. It's
Mhm.
helping me rethink how I approach competition in my own business.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked about competitive strategies. Now, there's one more concept in the textbook that I thought was really fascinating, and that's the product life cycle.
Ah, the PLC, a classic. It's a framework that helps companies understand those different stages a product goes through, from when it first comes out all the way to, when it eventually fades away.
Can you walk me through what those stages are?
Of course. So the first stage is the introduction stage. That's when a brand new product hits the market for the first time. Sales are usually pretty slow at this point because people are just starting to, learn about the product.
So you're saying it takes a while for it to catch on.
Right. Marketing is super important at this stage because you're trying to build awareness, generate excitement, get people to try the product for the first time.
So, think about when the first iPhone came out. It was totally revolutionary, but it took a while for people to really understand what it was and why they needed it.
Exactly. And Apple had to spend a lot of money on marketing to convince people to, ditch their old flip phones and make the switch.
Okay, so after the introduction stage, what comes next?
Then we hit the growth stage. That's when sales really start to take off. More and more people are buying the product. The competition starts heating up too because other companies are like, hey, this is a good idea. We should get in on this action.
So everyone's jumping on the bandwagon.
Yep. And this is where those battles for market share can get really intense. You're trying to convince customers that your product is the best one.
So, like, think about the cola wars between Coke and Pepsi. They're always trying to outdo each other with new products and advertising.
Perfect example. Okay, so after the growth stage, what happens? We hit the maturity stage.
Okay, what happens in that stage?
This is where sales growth starts to slow down a little bit because most of the people who are going to buy the product have already bought it. The market's getting saturated. Competition's still fierce, though, and everyone's fighting to maintain their share of the market.
So it's less about attracting new customers and more about holding on to the ones you've got.
Right. And this is where marketing focuses on reminding people about the product and encouraging them to, buy it again.
So you're talking about like those classic products like laundry detergent. It's a mature market. It's not going to suddenly grow a ton. So companies like Tide or Persil have to get creative, come up with new formulas or scents or packaging to try to, keep things fresh.
Exactly. They're trying to squeeze every last bit of profitability out of that market.
And then inevitably we hit the decline stage, right?
Unfortunately, yes. That's when sales actually start to go down because the product is starting to become obsolete.
People are moving on to something new and better.
Right. And at this point, some companies might even exit the market altogether. The ones who are left, they're trying to cut their losses and, minimize their costs. There's not much point in spending a lot of money on marketing at this point.
So, like, think about the old landline phone. Nobody's really buying those anymore because everybody has a cell phone.
Exactly. The landline's in the decline stage.
Wow, this whole product life cycle thing is so insightful. It really helps me understand, like, those challenges that companies have to deal with as their products go through these different stages.
It's a helpful framework, that's for sure.
Okay, we've covered so much in this deep dive. We've talked about how companies figure out who their ideal customer is, how they pick which markets to go after, how they position themselves, how they deal with the competition. And then we just talked about that whole product lifecycle thing. Anything else we should touch on?
I think we hit all the main points, but I do want to emphasize that market segmentation, it's not just something you do once and then you're done. It's something you got to keep working on. You got to keep watching for those trends, keeping an eye on your competition, and be willing to change your strategies as the market changes.
So in other words, stay flexible and stay informed.
That's it.
Okay. So after that deep dive into market segmentation, I feel like I can spot these strategies everywhere I look.
Yeah, it's kind of like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right?
Totally. So
Yeah.
listener, as you go about your day, pay attention. Think about those products you love. How do you think those companies are segmenting the market? Do you fit neatly into one specific segment, or are you a mix of different things? It's kind of fun to think about.
It is. Every time you click on something online, every purchase you make, on social media, you're adding to this huge pool of data that companies use to figure out who you are and what you want.
It's a little mind-blowing, right? Like, companies know so much about us these days. It's both fascinating and kind of creepy.
It's true. But on the positive side, that data can lead to some pretty cool benefits. Think about personalized recommendations, those tailored offers you get, or even just products that actually meet your needs. It's not always a bad thing.
True. Like, I gotta admit, I love how Spotify seems to always know exactly what music I'm in the mood for. Okay, before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. The textbook mentioned marketing in a slow growth economy, which feels really relevant these days.
Hmm.
Any tips for companies trying to navigate, a tough economic climate?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. When things get tough, a lot of companies just automatically slash their marketing budgets.
So like the logical thing to do, right? Cut costs wherever you can.
You'd think so, but the textbook actually says that can be a mistake. Sometimes the companies that invest strategically during a recession are the ones that come out stronger on the other side.
So it's about being smart and thinking long term, not just reacting to the immediate crisis.
Exactly. They had some good advice in there. One thing they said was to really focus on understanding your customer. Like, their needs might be changing during a recession. Maybe they're more price sensitive, or maybe they're looking for different types of products or services.
So you have to be in tune with how their needs and priorities are
Yeah.
shifting.
Yeah. Empathy is key. Another thing they talked about was making sure your value proposition is crystal clear.
Because every dollar counts when the economy's struggling.
Right. Exactly. You have to really convince people that your product is worth their money, especially when they're watching their spending.
Hmm.
And then they also said something about streamlining your product offerings. Maybe it's time to cut those products that aren't really performing well and just focus on your core strengths.
So do less, but do it better.
Yeah, exactly. And then one last thing that I thought was really interesting, they talked about exploring new, cost-effective ways to get your message out there. Like traditional advertising can be really expensive. Maybe it's time to get creative with digital marketing, social media, or even, partnerships with other companies.
So even tough times, there's room for innovation.
Always.
Well, I think we've officially covered it all. Huge thanks to you for walking us through all this. Market segmentation is definitely not as simple as I thought it was.
It's a whole world unto itself.
It is. And listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on how companies try to reach you and influence your decisions. So the next time you see an ad, or you're browsing online, or you're just walking through the store, think about what we talked about. You might start to notice things you didn't see before. And that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.